Hey, everybody, and welcome to another Legion Live, the somewhat weekly Facebook Live video series that we do. And I say somewhat weekly because sometimes it just doesn't happen. For example, 2 weeks ago when Norm and I were at Prosper, it didn't happen. Last week, it didn't happen because I was recovering from Prosper. But the good news is those of us that were there in Vegas for the Prosper show, got to learn a lot, got to network with a lot of people, which of course is the reason that we do those. The community, the family that we have, help us all become better business owners and better people, even because we alone sometimes have a hard time figuring out how to do things, right? Like we're good at things, not good at others. So we listen to advice, we receive encouragement, we give encouragement. We look at other people's successes, we look at other people's failures. And sometimes we are given a piece of advice or a piece of wisdom that is so profound that it literally makes us stop in our tracks. And that's what happened to me yesterday. And I want to share that analogy or that piece of wisdom with you. And it has to do with a toilet seat. Now, most of you know I'm the host of the AM/PM podcast, which is it's going to be a pretty big podcast. If you're not subscribed to it, you probably should be. At least it would make me feel all warm and fuzzy inside if you did. But I get to interview people outside of the traditional Amazon e-commerce space. I get to interview and get to meet and glean wisdom from people that are just generally good at business, right? They have different perspectives, they have different experiences, and they have different sets of knowledge, and sometimes what our inner circle or my inner circle is used to. Now, when I started this interview, kind of before we started recording, I asked the guy, I said, look, his name's Matt Edmondson, by the way. I said, Matt, what are we going to talk about? He said, we're going to talk about a toilet seat. And I go, all right, well, my close friends will know that, frankly, I get cracked up at potty humor, so this is going to be great. And he said, no, it's not like that. He said, but think about marketing from a toilet seat. I said, okay, marketing from a toilet seat. This sounds easy. I think I know where you're going with this, Matt. You're going to talk about impulse purchasing. You're talking about putting your brand or putting your ads or putting your content in front of people's eyes when they're most likely to see it. And I'm imagining that magical moment in my day where I have a little time to myself to make things happen in the bathroom, right? I don't want to say when I'm pooping, but it's when I'm pooping. And that's when I'm on my cell phone, right? And I'm scrolling and I'm looking at random stuff. And I'm thinking that Matt's going to talk about marketing from a toilet seat in the context of you have to be like in front of people's eyeballs when they're scrolling. That's not at all what he said. He said, look, Tim, I'm creative when I'm doing number 2 as well. Like that's my alone time without distractions, but that's not what I'm talking about. I said, well, how on earth are you going to tell me about marketing via a toilet seat or from the viewpoint or perspective of a toilet seat? That's what we're going to talk about. He said, all right, listen, Tim, when I was getting into business, this is him talking. He said, and I was growing and learning and all this stuff. He said, I heard an analogy. So this analogy is not mine and it's not Matt's. Matt Emerson, he gave us from me. He said, I heard an analogy about a janitor that was very successful. All right. And this janitor, who I guess he worked in like a big building or something where they rated the janitorial skills of the janitors and the cleaning folks. This janitor always won some sort of accolade for having the best cleaned toilet stalls. The absolute best. They were always the cleanest. They were always the tidiest. They were always the best put together. And when you dive into what he was doing, like, and I know this sounds silly, like, oh, an award for janitor, but listen, just hear me out. I told you before that this is like profound and it like shook me yesterday, but I love it. And I want to share it with you. What they found was the reason this guy kept winning these awards as a janitor and always had the cleanest toilet stalls in his bathrooms that he was responsible for is when he finished cleaning the bathroom stall, he would sit down on the toilet seat. That's what he did. He sat down on the toilet seat. And when he sat down on a toilet seat, he was able to see his work. He was able to see his task, his accomplishments from the viewpoint, from the visual corridor of the end user. Now, the profoundness didn't hit me yet. I'm thinking, what is this guy talking about? This is so bizarre. And then I thought about the actual mechanics of what a janitor would do walking into a public bathroom toilet stall, right? He would push the door open. He would walk in. He'd spray some cleaner. He'd scrub some things. He'd rub some things down. He might mop the floor. Then he's going to back out, right? Because it's a small space. You're not thinking about going in and looking at a lot of different angles. So a typical janitor would go in. They'd clean what they see. They do. But until that janitor sits down on the toilet seat, closes the stall door. He's not going to see if the back of the door is dirty. He's not going to see maybe a different angle of the floor where there's some muddy shoe prints. He's not going to see the back of the toilet paper dispenser that might have dust on it, right? So the reason that janitor was so good was when he finished cleaning the bathroom stall, he turned around, closed the door, and sat down on the toilet seat and viewed his work from the perspective of the end user. I don't know why, but that was profound to me. It like shook me yesterday. I kept thinking about it last night. I've used this analogy to like 20 people, and I had to share it with you. Here's the takeaway. This is what Matt in the episode, by the way, this episode is coming out where he explained this more in depth. It's coming out this Thursday on AMPN Podcast. But basically what he said is in business, we as brand owners, we as sellers, we as experienced creators via a product, sometimes forget what it looks like for the end user, for the consumer. We think about the packaging. We think about the product. We think about the buying experience, when sometimes we need to think about ourselves as the buyer. If we were buying the product, what would we think? So we as business owners think about saving money, making sure the product's safe. So our product packaging, we might have some big, bulky, ugly industrial things going to keep the product safe and it's inexpensive. Where what Matt was saying was they started using this philosophy of toilet seat marketing and toilet seat perspective and thinking about how can we actually, with very minimal cost, increase the opening experience, create the user experience, create better packaging and all of those things that go along with it to create a better experience for the buyer. So he did some crazy stuff. For example, he sold a cosmetic product that came in a bigger box, right? And inside that instead of that box, to protect the cosmetic product, they had like plastic bubble padding. All right, you've all seen it inside boxes. What they decided was like, this isn't very eco-friendly and it's ugly. Like you just throw that out on the ground or throw it in the trash and then you get to your product. So they started researching creative ways to protect that product, to protect that package within its container, right? Within its box. What they decided to do is use a combination of tissue paper and popcorn, freaking popcorn. So what they did is they bought a bunch of big popcorn machines like you'd see at a movie theater. They put them in the warehouse. They didn't use butter or salt, and they literally popped popcorn. And they would take that popcorn and use it as the filling material within their package. And what that did when everybody opened up the box, then opened up this tissue paper, and there was like popcorn. It went along with the theme and the branding and kind of like the stylistic guide of the product. It didn't really cost them anything extra. It was unique. It was quirky. And people started taking social media pictures and people started posting like, how cool is this? There's popcorn here. Eventually he had to put a sticker and said, don't eat the popcorn. It was not prepared in a food safe environment. But my point is he started thinking outside the box and wondered, if I were the end consumer of my product, if I were the buyer, if I were the person sitting on the toilet seat, looking at the stall from this direction, if I'm the buyer opening the box as the end consumer, what does that viewpoint look like that's different from me as the brand owner that maybe trying to save money or just have industrial packaging that's bomb-proof or that's easy on my warehouse guys? Now, I understand that running a business requires balance. We can't always make everything perfect, and the customer is not always right. Sometimes the customers have unrealistic expectations. Sometimes the customers are selfish, and we do need to make money. So there is a balance here. But I think that a lot of times we don't consider that perspective enough, and we miss big opportunities, tremendously big opportunities. And it doesn't just have to do with selling an e-commerce product. It can actually have to do with life in general, right? Think about every relationship that you have, your family, your friends, your spouses, your significant other. We always hear the term, like, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, which is great. But sometimes we also need to sit on the toilet seat ourselves and look at the perspective from that person. Anyways, there's my soapbox preachy rant for today. A little different than a lot of our Legion Lives that are more actionable with e-commerce. But you know what I'm starting to figure out? Sometimes it's more important to talk about these big picture, philosophical, theoretical, strategic things than actually how to increase your ACoS by 1% by changing an image, right? All that stuff's important. We have that content too. But as I dive deeper and deeper into this entrepreneurial space and I figure out like, hey, we're kind of all the same and we all have the same flaws and same weaknesses and we make the same mistakes, the things that are starting to hit home for me a little bit more are lessons like perspective from a toilet seat. So we'll start sharing that with you guys more often. Hope you guys appreciate it. I have not looked at the comments because I've been talking so fast, but I appreciate those of you that have jumped in. And if any of you have any requests for types of content, shoot them over to us. We love it. If you're watching this replay on YouTube, thank you for watching the replay. post your comments or post your thoughts or your reactions to my idea here that I'm sharing. That's not actually my idea. In the comments section, the description below, or in the comments section below the description of this YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up. All right. Thank you all. I love you. And we'll see you next week on the Legion Live.